flipping the table.
This is Michael, and it's Season 2 of Flipping the Table. This is a podcast featuring honest conversations about food, farming, and the future. I do this because I'm inspired by all the people you will hear. Some of them I've known for decades, and others I've just met. But each of them are creating the knowledge, the food enterprises, farms, and ranches that will make for a future that works better for us all. Hello, it's May 20th, 2020, as we record this introduction to our conversation with Jack Algiere, the farm director at Stone Barns Center, located in Pocantico Hills, New York, which is about an hour drive from the city of New York. We remain under a shelter-in-place order here in Sonoma County, and our heart goes out to the state and the city of New York, which has suffered most deeply in the U.S. from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the third installment in our series about farm and food system education centers and their leaders. We began with Kathleen Finley of the Glenwood Center for Regional Food and Farming, which is in the Highlands above the Hudson Valley, just upstate from Stone Barns. We then spoke with Dave Henson of the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, located near me in West Sonoma County. Now we move to Jack Algiere and Stone Barns. Like the previous two, Jack and his center are deeply focused on educating the next generation in the hope that they will finally fulfill the vision of a resilient and regenerative food system. The pandemic has opened the door to new possibilities, to a potential accelerated transformation that heretofore has been too slow for the good of our planet. In the weeks since the crisis began, I've joined with dozens of colleagues in communicating with our political leaders here in California and nationally with the aim of moving them in a healthier direction as we enter a world where pandemic and climate-related disasters, like fire and flood, are more frequent. I'm sure that Jack and his colleagues in New York are similarly engaged in moving the culture forward in this moment. Jack joined Stone Barns back in 2003. The stated mission of the center is to shape an ecological food culture that centers on farmers and their stewardship of the land to amplify their success. Jack has built an integrated farming operation rooted in land stewardship, innovation, and community, which also serves as a training campus for young farmers and chefs, changemakers, and the public. He's been actively farming for more than 2 decades and has trained a generation of young farmers in organic and biodynamic practices. He oversees the extensive farming operations at Stone Barns, integrating a holistic farm team that works together on multi-species grass-fed livestock, grains, field crops, greenhouse, fruit, flowers, wild landscapes, and compost in a 4-season regenerative system that encompasses over 400 acres, and that includes public lands in the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. With his wife and fellow farmer Shannon, Jack has 2 sons. As I know you will, I find Jack to be humble and calm in his communication, enthused about his work and life, and fiercely committed to Stone Barns' mission and the work of transforming our nation's agriculture. Please enjoy our conversation. We are at the Stone Barns Center outside New York City, which is partnering with the Blue Hill Restaurant. I'm with the farmer and the leader of the farming crew here, Jack Algiere, and he's going to tell us today, we're going to have a conversation about your life and your work here. It's good to be here.
Great. It's
great to have you here, Michael. Thanks.
We're in the, describe where we are for the audience.
So we're sitting inside a greenhouse, all soil diversified vegetable greenhouse. We're about 22,000 square feet. So while everything is pretty cold outside right now, it's feeling pretty protected and nice. We're surrounded by mustard greens and carrots and celtuce and sisai and escarole and lettuce and turnips and all sorts of different nice things, ginger and turmeric.
It's a really nice temperature in here. What would you say the temperature is?
It's probably about 45 degrees in here, maybe probably 45, 50 degrees. This house gets down to freezing temperature, so we get it down to 32, and it ventilates in the winter at about 55. So we like to keep it nice and cold, and all the crops that are grown in here just stay right above 50, right above freezing temperature, and that keeps it. I've been built this thing in 2003, and we have not sprayed a chemical, organic or otherwise, in this greenhouse since that, and it's been running year-round since 2003.
And that's because the temperature just keeps the bugs down.
Temperature is one thing. We have a long-term crop rotation in this house. It's a 10-year rotation. We're running 3 to 5 crops per section a year.
Wow.
And it's just a very productive, healthy environment.
Yeah, it's actually, I love the smell too. It just, you can smell the earth, and it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now everybody knows where we are. Did you get into farming, and how did you get here? And where were you born?
Well, I was born in Rhode Island. I was born in southern Rhode Island in Westerly, which is right on the ocean. My family raised me on a small homestead farm. We raised goats and vegetables and pigs and chickens and stuff. And spent a lot of time with my dad, who's a great mechanic, and my mother, who is a wonderful, excellent gardener and lover of nature. So spent a lot of time on the farm just kind of playing and, doing a lot of mechanics and stuff like that. And I was a drummer and a surfer, and that was sort of how I grew up. And I thought,
nice life.
That's pretty good. I thought I was going to go to school for music. And I had a sort of trajectory to go to Berkeley and Boston.
Ooh.
And when I was in high school, I was working at some greenhouses, Smith's greenhouses. Worked for a guy, Korean War veteran, Bud Smith. Worked for him, and while I was working in these greenhouses, it was the first time I was ever exposed to chemical use. The farm I grew up on we had library of Rodale essentially.
Wow.
That kept us honest.
Rodale was the great organic farming center, that kind of a intellectual center for organic farming.
Yeah, and on the East Coast, certainly the Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening and Composting and Herb Production, all that was really some of the most well-written stuff around, and I think guided my parents in being good farmers. So working in high school at these greenhouses, because I started working young and mostly in either some sort of outdoor work, landscaping or greenhouse production, and there was a lot of chemicals, and I was just really surprised what was going on, why we were using these chemicals, and why all these old timers that I was working with felt like they had to abandon these organic practices that they had for so long, and how mostly it was just because the consumers had pretty well stopped caring about the health of things and more just wanted their geraniums and wanted their stuff. And so you could just see, this was pre-box store, but right about at the time when the box stores started to surface in the late 80s and 90s. And I just decided, my parents, we sold the farm later in my high school years, and I just decided that I really wanted to direct my relationship back to nature and use that rhythm and everything to guide my farming career, essentially. So I took a hard left and went to school for plant science. I have a degree in plant science from University of Rhode Island. And while I was in school, I was doing more garden design and landscape, and worked at Meadowbrook Herb Gardens for Heinz Grotke in Rhode Island, a biodynamic farm, and really started getting into Steiner and reading more about.
That's Rudolf Steiner, the person who really came up with biodynamic farming systems.
Yeah, reading that stuff gave me a sense of that they're, these ideas are not just, they weren't just coming to me or something like that. This was really possible, and it was still okay for us to be thinking about whole systems and how we could apply that stuff, and especially the greenhouse system, as we're sitting in here today. One of the big reasons why I manage a space like this is because I don't want to be in a toxic environment. I don't want to work in a place or grow food in a place that's dangerous for me or the environment or the people that eat it. So my wife Shannon and I, who now been dated and have been married for many years, we were in college together and decided that after I graduated that we were going to move west, mostly because we felt like the organic movement was stronger in Colorado and California, and made our way out there. When I was in California,
Where were you?
well, in Colorado, we were in outside of Boulder in Lyons at Gem of the Field with Dan Mates, and really great small farm on the flats there in the Flatiron, right below in the foothills. And then I moved to the Sierra foothills and met amigo Bob Contisano.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that connection.
Yeah, and it was a pretty serendipitous. I ended up I met his past wife, his ex-wife Kalita, and started doing some volunteering and food preparation for the Eco Farm conference. And then I just started working for Amigo. I was going out on road with him, doing some consulting stuff, and started managing his olive business. And he took me under his wing, and so I did that with him for several years. And Shannon and I decided we wanted to move back closer to our family after 9/11. And so her family's also from Rhode Island. So the two of us, we decided to go back and visit our family, and some old friends of ours who had an estate farm wanted to see this estate get turned into a community-supported farm. So we moved back to farms called Whitegate in Lyme, Connecticut, and we helped them sort of transform what was this beautiful estate into a big working organic CSA. And we were there for a couple of years, really got it on its feet with them, and were content where we were. And out of the blue, I got a call from Amigo, who I had, in some ways, I'd say that I felt like I didn't really want to leave California, but there was a lot else going on in my life. And, it really shows that you can, your connections last a lot longer than you're always around each other, and felt like that was one of my many mentors, but one of my strongest. And he came back and he said, there's this gig. I think you're perfect for it. You guys would really be into this. I was just with Elliot Coleman, another great farmer, and he's doing some advising on this property. And he's like, I can't think of anybody else who should be doing this project up in New York. And so he said, just call Elliot right now. Just call him up and tell him to go see him and Barbara. So, okay. Well, I had admired Elliot Coleman for years and had been practicing his a lot of the things that he'd written out in the New Organic Grower and the other books that he'd written, and was doing a lot of winter growing and greenhouses. We all hit it off pretty well. I mean, we've been friends ever since that, and that was really the day that we just learned about stone barns and what could potentially have been happening here. At the point, it was still kind of a dream. And I moved here in October, and Shannon moved after me after she finished up the fall crop there. And we spent the next 6 months really working on building this place. It was a union job, so there was about 200 union workers restoring these gorgeous stone barns here that were originally built in the 30s. We built this greenhouse here through the course of the winter. And by May of 2004, we were open to the public. We have now about 10 acres of organically raised vegetables and half-acre in greenhouse and some other tunnels, flowers, and I manage about 400 acres of grassland with cattle, sheep, goats, and hens and
You
other.
still do pigs here?
Yeah, and we do pigs too. Forest-raised, waste-fed pigs.
And I remember I was here years ago, and it was probably within 2 years of your opening. Maybe that's right, but it was sometime in the 2000s, and you took us out and showed us the hogs under the trees.
Yeah, the pig program here is really, I've learned so much from these things, and I never considered myself that, it was one of these things that I really did spend, even though I grew up with animal pigs and goats and stuff. My focus was largely on plants for a long time, and my partner who I was working with here, Craig, had been raising pigs and loved pigs and sheep, and had this program going for a long time. And I inevitably ended up inheriting that program with and actually considering taking on, which at the time we were farming on about 80 acres here, and since then, in the past few years now, I've taken on another 300 acres of land in the park preserve.
Wow.
Plus 100 acres or so more forest. So we had this pig program. We were raising Berkshires in the forest and doing a lot of breeding and raising them in that space. And we shifted that program to a 100% waste fed and ecologically centered pig program, which has just really got me to think about this, not just for the pigs, but for all animals and all systems in general on this farm. One, the interdependency of these pieces and what they do, and how we go about thinking as a group of farmers, as a collective sort of community of farmers and chefs and people involved in this, that everything comes back to the ecological service of whatever enterprise we think we want to get into. Just because somebody wants bacon doesn't mean you should have pigs. And from my perspective, if we really want to change the food system, we need to lead from the ecological service. So if we find the reason to use this animal for its best possible use, and we can actually do good for our ecosystem and the landscape that's around us, then we should be figuring out how to make that truly regenerative as a business. But the service of that animal, whether it's a cow or that just eats grass or a pig that's eating, waste-fed mix of, in this case, we are doing fermented, re-fermented brewer's mash and expired dairy and pre-consumer waste, vegetables from the restaurant and all the vegetable scraps from the farm. And we're doing these seasonal productions of pigs that are just extraordinary.
Wow. But I want to stop on this because I think it's beautifully said. The idea that because agriculture, the schools and the culture is taught that it's about yields for a marketplace. And what you're saying, it's not about yields for a marketplace. It's about an ecological service provided by a species that then has the corollary benefit of feeding us.
Yeah, well, that's right.
You flipped it on its head.
We have to. If we're going to look at a future where we are trying to, well, we know now that the care for the land, the sequestration of carbon or improving the microbiome or building soil health or building habitats, all of those are really important things. But it comes down to us figuring out ways to do this biologically, not mechanized. And the way to get back to those kind of systems is to recognize what the service of those animals are. The idea of offsetting carbon, one good thing for another bad thing, to me, it's more about offsetting the chemical and mechanical solutions for a lot of these things with biological solutions. That, we all know, everybody who's listening to this, who's farming, knows that as much as you put in, most of the time you're just paying it back if you're doing it well. And so the reality is, if you're paying for tractors and you're paying for all this equipment and repair and all this stuff, then you end up starting to offset people. And this is really a biological thing. It's about, ecological and social well-being. I mean, this is why farmers are wanting to get into this. We're in a great and very fortunate position here as a nonprofit with an incredibly established partner and as a restaurant, Blue Hill. Dan Barber, Dan and I, and our relationship of being able to develop a very creative partnership over all these years, it's very privileged. Our relationship with the state and their openness to us working on this land and building conservation action plans and the rest of the community. So the way I look at it is if I have all of those rights, if I have all the access to do that, the way I give that gift back is by taking the risk that I can. Is to test our community.
As far as it can go.
How committed are you to be there if I make a mistake or something, the weather changes or something like that? Because what we keep noticing is the more we do that, what success is just finding the next great question that comes out of it. Like it's all comes in the inspiration. So we're navigating this path, and when everybody's curious and hungry for this stuff, literally.
You're not just talking about the food. You're talking about the thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's all the same.
The experiments, hungry for all of it.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done really is we've siloed everything out so much.
In the conventional world, right?
And totally in the conventional world that we forget that farming is more than just productivity, or that conservation is solely just preservation, or that horticulture is just meant to be beautiful, and that what we're doing here is all of those things. That beautiful and delicious have associations to aesthetic and health, like it's emotional relationships to our food, and we've disconnected. By and large, our society is disconnected from nature and agriculture as a whole, and we maybe don't even know how important food is in our sort of reconnection. That the way we eat is that ecological act.
Yeah, it's. This morning I interviewed Peter Hoffman, and I think he even said that he had done some things with you in the past, back when at Savoy, some of the dinners that he was having.
Peter is brilliant,
yeah.
and has always had that kind of ecological sense.
Yeah, it was. So it's beautiful to hear. But you say it different ways, but you're saying a very similar thing about the relationship, the importance of the relationship.
Yeah, well, when I think about like what our future looks like for farming, the reality is, first off, all of these incredible experts and people that are just sort of gravitating. Here you are, been in this program for a long time and know the organic business in and out, and the food system, and so many people come in here that really trying to get everybody together. A lot of this stuff, I'm not saying anything new, and we're not even really doing anything that new. What we're doing is recombining these things in ways that are the catalyst of that by itself is
scaling.
Powerful.
Yes.
Yes.
You're scaling. I mean, you talked about the acreage you've taken on. More acreage, which means more impact.
Yeah, well, that's been a big one, because I feel like that's where it starts to affect when the state recognizes the benefit of the things that we're doing and the local community recognizes that, you can just see, because it starts to affect these things like land access. Because, when we look at the world, the way I see it is that we kind of have these inherent rights as being human. One is just access to land, and not about ownership. It's about responsibility that we never block the capacity to be able to learn from each other, that these are not proprietary ideas, that this is all there. And it only gets better by sharing it. In fact, we all learn something. So that's been the great thing about what we're doing here. And in general, as you know, with all farmers, like, we love to share our ideas, partially because we love to share and talk about what we do, but also because we know that nobody is just going to take that prescription and do it just like that. Everybody's looking to find their own way and to navigate that, and that's what also just the thriftiness of being a farmer is.
And is that a reflection of the differences in place? Like, someone can't farm exactly like you because they live in a different place with a slightly different or a greatly different climate. I mean, you have to farm to the place.
Right. I could say, what we're doing in here is, especially when we first started, it was, I was thinking about Elliot as a great example, but, Elliot lives in Maine. There are principles, inherent principles that exist in this stuff, but it is learn as you go and experiential. And so it's all about how we're assessing our work all the time, and individuality. and the patterns of and principles and patterns and ratios that exist out there. Those are real things to learn through experience, but it's all our own space. And when we get a lot of young people that have worked come in here to apprentice with us and train with us in different ways as chefs, as farmers, hundreds, many hundreds over the years. And when I look at this group, I think they're coming in here for kind of three reasons. First, they are here to reconnect to nature. Most of them are postgraduate, have some degree in something else, not agricultural usually, but maybe environmental or engineering or whatever. But they're coming here because they want to do good in the world. And they're smart and fast learners and good, articulate communicators. But they really are looking for that personal connection to this thing and be able to do good. The other thing is that the reality is that it's activism. It's social activism to be growing food for local community populations. We need more farmers engaged in this stuff. So they're also coming in here just because there's this glimmer of hope. Regardless of their parents might be upset that they're not paying back their student loan immediately. The reality is, I think by and large they're on the right track going down this road because they're listening to themselves. They're listening to the fact that, that action, that this farming, growing food for communities is social activism, and it is radical stuff. And it feeds itself. The community feeds itself through this kind of work. It doesn't solve the fact that farms are still generally on their own to be successful, and that's not okay. And that's the third thing, is that this group of people coming in should not be fooled to think that they are just going to be homesteaders and selling food to cities, that they need to be entrepreneurs. And these enterprises mean that they have to find equity in the rest of the system. They have to find their chef. They have to find their community. They have to, connect with that artisan and share the value of that product that they are making together. Because otherwise, that's like us saying we're going to keep extracting this organic matter from the soil and turn it into cash. The soil's our equity. We've gotten so far over the past 75 years of just reselling our fertility, just input, output.
Yeah, I like that idea. And one of the things that we talked about today with Peter was his feeling, his sense of that connection with the farmers. And it's a group, it's a community effort to invest in the land. The farmers like the interface with the land, and the chef is the interface with the community. And together you have that, you create a synergy. And if the consciousness is right, if people are thinking correctly about it, then you get a positive regenerative dynamic going on.
Yeah, well, yes. And actually to, bringing Peter into this, I think he is sort of extraordinary in that, for decades, he's been riding his bike to the markets and committed to these farmers. The same way Dan is, he makes deeper commitments to the farmers that he's working with. That's not farm to table. Those are real commitments. Just showing up at the farmer's market and cherry picking something off a table is not a true commitment to the agricultural greater success of that, as like wanting more farms and wanting successful farmers. That commitment needs to go much farther than just, a loose relationship with a farmer's market.
I want to go back to something else you said when you were describing that connection. The three things that you described why the young people are coming here to study with you guys and to work with you. The third one was, you said they can't just, it's not just about activism, it's just not just about being close to the earth. There's an entrepreneurial, and this reminds me of a conversation I had a while back with Anya Fernald from Belcampo, who was saying that it is difficult to farm and make a living. You actually have to really understand a lot. It's a challenging business. I mean, there aren't really MBAs in agriculture, and even in the agricultural schools. Do you think that particularly for folks who are breaking out of the commodity system and trying to do regenerative systems. Do you think that I mean, where do people learn that? Here?
Well, I think there's places to. Yes, I think you can learn that here. Actually, just a friend and someone who's doing some entrepreneurial training with us out of UC Berkeley just walked past us here.
Said hi, yeah.
Right. So, we do a lot of business training here for our farmers for training, and we have a lot of people coming in to talk about that. Not so much to just make their farm business work, but you got to think of it this way. What is the percentage of successful businesses that start up? 5%? Like, we're talking about farm businesses. So if you could say farms are like every business except with weather, the reality is what we're dealing with is a very different kind of agriculture. Agriculture as a business alone in the universe is, from my perspective, still a 20th century paradigm. Mm-hmm. That we have to look at enterprise and entrepreneurship as that the vegetables themselves are the product that we're selling, especially if we're trying to, this concept of regenerative, that what we're saying is we trust that the soils are generative, that they're going to keep giving, that they're going to build, that we're going to build organic matter, we're going to build this, sequester carbon and do this stuff to get more self-generated health out of this space. I don't love to play number games with the soil. It's not about the amount of organic matter. It's not about the highest. What we're looking for is balance in the system. But you could say that 0.1% of organic matter gain a year is pretty good, mm-hmm. right? In some of these spaces, it's been much higher than that, but still. If we're talking about decimal percentages of gain, and if you're any other business and you're not making a 10% margin on whatever business you're in, where does that money come from with agriculture? Where are you extracting that 10% margin from? Better not be from the soil if you're suggesting that you're regenerative. It has to come from some other value add of your work. That's why partnering with other people that's why we need more artisans. We need more people in the middle with us that are physically with us, not just another third party, another person, but people that we can commit. That was great about Stone Barns. It's that we have butchers and bakers and chefs and florists and scientists and writers and a whole mix of different people that are combining their strengths to create businesses.
So it's a synergy. It's a creative synergy.
Yeah, because it builds commitment. It builds trust in the group, and it allows one thing to maybe share some of the work, because if a farmer is having to deal with all the distribution themselves or has to sell their fresh product because there's no place to store it collectively, or there's no place to preserve and do that stuff. All the regional infrastructure that really should be there for us has long since evaporated. And that's where these things, we should start coming back together with that.
I like this because there's a theme this year, this second season of Flipping the Tables. Really, we're talking to people like you who are involved in running businesses. And we're really trying to focus on the businesses because the innovation, like what you're describing, this relationship with Blue Hill and with the community is where the innovation is happening. It's broken down all these businesses that were working together, and like ecosystems of businesses. So what you're describing, what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is you have to have all these people in the mix so that all that good thinking can happen, all that creativity, but also you're sharing the burdens of making it happen right. And mm-hmm. So I'm hearing you say that young farmers who are going into this world have to think about, they can't just go get a farm and start farming. They have to build that community, the food community.
My guess is that, that's kind of, there's a lot of examples of where that's worked in the past. The concept of CSA has emerged out of places where, the farms all got run out of town and the CSA started because people wanted food again in their communities. The biodynamic community at large, Biodynamics is, the way that it was initially designed was to be whole community, to build that kind of idea. So those ideas have always kind of been there throughout the 20th century, but not in any mainstream perspective. And if we're not seeing the growth in farmers markets and we're not seeing the growth in CSAs, because there isn't, and in fact, if you look at New York City, we're losing farmers markets.
Same as
So
California.
where is that? What's going on there? We everybody seems to think that there are more regenerative farms and more commitment to the local food system and bioregionalism, and there's every word in the book to describe this stuff. Show me a farmer who's really succeeding from that, who's really winning, but that doesn't have a great personal connection to others in that food community, because it's circularity. Because if you're the first chain as a on a link that's linear, you're just giving stuff away, and we can't have that kind of economy. That's why, if we're going to try to at this point, because we're not in a climate emergency, you could argue we're in an urgent position right now, and in some places there are emergencies like fires, but fertilizer's pretty darn cheap, and people are still have that option every day to use chemicals all they want. We have to physically self-limit ourselves if we want to try to do this with composts and rotations and all this diversity that adds a complexity. And we have to embrace this concept of complexity.
How many people come here a year?
About 100,000 people come through this, and we are sort of centrally located in the center of about a 2,000-acre park preserve with, about 60 miles of carriage trails. So there are people, and we're a half an hour from New York City. So lots of people come to enjoy the preserve, the forests and pastures that are around this place. It's a destination. It's really kind of an island among a sprawling suburbia. These thousands of preserved acres is a pretty extraordinary place. So lots of people come to visit, and we're porous. So, one, we embrace our community as a stakeholder. So we do all kinds of programming here for the general public who just walk through. We give tours and give classes and have we have a cafe and a store and all these things that are happening all the time for that community. We have diners, and we have, and then we have multiple layers for change agents and training
big
programs.
Conference coming up with young farmers. Why don't you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
So the Young Farmers Conference is, we're now, I could say how many years we're into this, but I think, I wouldn't want to guess, maybe I'll guess 12. Many years into this conference, it has been a pretty extraordinary group. And, farm conferences by themselves have a particular way about them. Organic farming conferences across the country have a way of really reinvigorating people, because we've spent an entire season mostly with our heads down, working in our spaces, having short conversations with the public that comes and buys our product. But these conferences at the end of a season like this just get everybody back together, and it is a reaffirmation that there are great ideas out there, and there's a lot of other like-minded people doing this stuff. And this particular conference is totally focused on young and emerging farmers, and so it's a very specific function. And so all of the ways we go about teaching that and providing forum for those people to get together is quite unique and like different than most conferences.
How many young farmers come?
We can hold about 300 in
Wow.
our main hayloft, and we have.
How long does it last?
It is 3 days, 3 solid days.
3 solid days of young farmers sharing information.
Yeah, we have kind of a show and tells. There's like the greenhouse will be a big expo for slow tools, for our farm tool design work, and different systems. And we'll be doing like a maker's fair for all kinds of different artisans to share their things, and food businesses, farmers. And is really the focus is really to dive into this idea of farmers and connections to the artisans as how we rebuild these regional food systems. Again, the farmer alone in the world as a business, I think is a very risky thing in a business that's already kind of new and emerging in startup in general. And with people, again, that have a lot of values that they want to see get passed across. And when we look at our young people coming up, the generations of younger people getting into this now, from high school up, and even I look at my kids are 11 and 14, two boys, and see their understanding of the food system. And, for these older generations, you could see, we've all gotten burned by the lack of transparency that exists in our food system. But I'll tell you that the younger group of people that's coming up, they don't even tolerate.
Right.
They first off, I don't even know if they have the time to be, really dig into the transparency stuff, but I do know that they care about it. And if you're a company that doesn't respect those kind of values truly, you're just dropped. Like it's evolving.
Yeah, this is a theme that's come up here since my trip here in New York, talking to many people, that the next generation, the millennials, are so much more focused at their age than I was at that age on food and authentic experience, and also I think values, and also I think maybe it has to do with climate change and the challenges that they see ahead of them. They want to see solutions, and they want to support with solving the problems.
Yeah, well, because there are more and more examples of it working, and that's what we continually want to become as we grow and evolve. And we started looking at this problem in 2003 as a group here, and made our best effort to create an environment that can really highlight those ideas and share them with as many people as we could. 15 years later, it's necessary for us to reassess that and to look and to say, you know what, there's more. This has changed, and we can do more to take more responsibility and test and experiment together and show people a real experience, like an example. I think what we miss in a lot of advocacy work that's out there, because there's an awful lot of good advocacy, but we miss the example of those interactions as real working systems. We can learn about practices, and circular economy has to be built out of this stuff, because that's the only way we're going to shed a fossil fuel, non-renewable kind of system.
Yeah, that's a good segue into what I want to talk about now, because we're approaching the end of the conversation, unfortunately. But what do you see? I mean, over the next 10 years, what is your hope for agriculture?
Well, what I want to see is more opportunity for our urban and suburban environments to have access to real food, to farms and the landscape, and for farms and conservation work to be more blended. Very few places in the world have suburbs like we do. It's a very disruptive kind of environment from a natural perspective. And there's a lot of land available and access to all that. In terms of the urban, the rural spaces, I think the demand for more diversity is what will shift that. The market, the idea of having people do more regenerative work and care about soil health and have the farmers doing that, it really comes with the demand. If people are only demanding corn and soy, we're not going to grow oats and sunflowers and flax and buckwheat. I mean, people got to want to eat this stuff. If we want, we should be asking for multi-species mixes. We should be asking for more perennial
On the
Midwest.
farms.
Yeah, I mean, the farmers will shift in this way. That you can't just ask a farmer to start doing these big, diversified mixes and stuff like that. I mean, it just shows how naive the public is at large to really be able to demand this of the farm environment, that because it's all based on their commitment. And if the commitment is if the ask is we want all these farmers to be caring about soil health and not using fossil fuels and having more mixed crops and growing more perennial things and researching those stuff, then ask for it and fund it and commit to these ideas. Because it's not going to change because of what is it? A third of a single % of our country is actually farming. That group of people has been marginalized. And it's not just going to solve the problem because we might think as an eater that it's been the farmers that have caused this problem.
Not true. Right. I'm with you.
More farmers. We need a lot more farmers, and we need a lot more people who aren't necessarily farming, but being that bridge, being those business partners, being those community partners. And if you're an investor and you think you want to help farming and buying a farm seems like the right way, maybe you should invest in community type infrastructure rather than just buying more farmland. And there's a lot of things people can do.
Give an example of what you mean by community infrastructure. What would that look like?
Shared cold storage, preservation cooperative kitchens, butcheries, slaughter facilities.
Yeah.
You name it.
Yeah, that's a good call there, to get people to think more broadly. A lot of people that have means would like to have a farm and support a farm. But there's a lot more to it that's needed.
Yeah. The same way, if you live in the suburb and you think that you heard about the bees and wish that the bee populations were stronger, raising bees is probably not the solution. Changing your landscape to a pollinator-friendly environment is. That there are lots of different ways we can solve these problems together, and we still have this nuclear family kind of idea of how this country can work. But we have to think broader. We have to think about bioregionalism. We have to think about renewing our resources, and we have to think about working together as community.
In circular economies.
And that's it.
Well, sadly, our time is up. Been 45 minutes of really interesting, engaging, stimulating conversation. I really appreciate it, Jack. You're doing a fabulous job here. I hope many people will come, many more, hundreds of thousands more will come visit, and that lots of young farmers will come from all over the country to spend time with you and your colleagues here. And best of luck in the years ahead.
Thank you, Michael, and stay tuned.
Hey, this is Michael. As you know, Flipping the Table is sponsored by Roots of Change. You can keep our program going by making a contribution to Roots of Change through our website, rootsofchange.org.
Flipping the Table.